Hey, Dr. Hetland here. Welcome to today's 3-minute chiropractic seminar. I'm holding up this Starbucks cup because it's Friday and on the way into work got a Starbucks, and I wanted to tell you something I learned recently from a colleague of mine, Dr. Charles Majors. I'll include a link at the bottom of this in this email here, a resource link to his Facebook page, because he's one of my favorite chiropractors to follow on Facebook. He posts almost every day, probably a couple times a day, something to do with cancer, because he was diagnosed, I think it was a little over 5 years ago, diagnosed with a stage 4 brain tumor, and he's got his whole story, but basically he's a survivor of stage 4 brain tumor, and he didn't use any of the traditional methods of cancer treatment because he thought he would die if he tried those. And he's got his whole story. He wrote a book called Cancer Killers, and it literally is a killer book. I would recommend everyone read it, even if you don't have cancer. I've read it several times, own it, given it away. It's a fantastic book. But what does this have to do with Starbucks? Or I didn't want to hate on anyone who is a Caribou fan, so we'll show a little love for the Caribou fans out there. But what does this have to do with it? One of the things I learned about getting a hot cup of coffee from either of these places or anywhere where it has this style of a cup and lid where it's like plastic, thin plastic, something to think about is when you got that hot coffee just like steaming up to this thin plastic lid, that chemical, that heat will burn the chemical and start to melt it, and it has the potential to kind of ooze back into your coffee, and then when you go to drink it, you could be drinking that chemical that's melted and dripped off into your coffee. It's a really interesting thing to just think about. Not certain about the research there. Excuse me, there. If I find any research about this concept here, I'll include it in the resource link. But anyways, I learned that from Dr. Charles Majors, and it's something that I think about now when I get a cup of coffee. I just take the lid off and let it kind of, I don't really use the lid. I try not to anyways. It's hard sometimes when you're in the car or whatever. You don't want to spill it all over yourself. But I guess the best thing is to be prepared and not necessarily even use these cups if you don't have to. I mean, if you're getting a cup of coffee several times a week or every day, try and think of a different way to use it and not use these cups and these lids, because it might be an unhealthy thing for you. Just a little tip for you. Hope you enjoyed it. Happy Friday. I'll see you back here tomorrow.